Hi, and welcome back. We are looking at a few exam questions on the Memento design pattern, and we want to understand how to apply the Memento design pattern. If you haven't looked at the overview of the Memento design pattern, please go and look at that video because it provides you the context that you need to answer these questions. Okay, let's look at this one. It says this question relates to the book list class given in question 2, and the book list class looks like that. It's a book list class, and it's got a list of books, right? And some other functions which we don't really care about. Rewrite a book list class or the book list class and its implementation file so that, number one, there can only be one instance of this class in the application, which is also properly deleted. B, the list implements a backup facility. Use the appropriate design patterns to meet these requirements. Note that you are not required to write implementations for the existing functions. You can assume that the following class has been defined and implemented to provide this backup facility. Now, I love this question because it was confusing for most students because they wanted you to apply two design patterns on one class. You were not providing two answers for this question. No, there was one answer, but in that you were applying the appropriate design patterns. And what I love about design patterns is the questions are straightforward. I mean, you guys sometimes fail design patterns, but I think it's just negligence because the questions are actually very straightforward. One instance, you know it's singleton. Backup facility, you know it's Memento because there's no any other time in this course where you talk about one instance and it's not singleton, or backup facility and it's not Memento, or sometimes serializer, but usually just Memento, right? So I'm not going to touch on singleton. I'll maybe just include it at the end to show you how the final solution would look like, but let's look more on the Memento side of things, which is part B. And they are saying you have been provided with this class already. Now, if you look at this class, I mean, you see the word friend and everything is private, you know this is the Memento class because it's the only class out of those three which has, actually, to be honest, it's the only time in this way, of course, you will ever make a function in a class, a friend of another class. You see a friend in a class, you know you're dealing with Memento design pattern. And you see the word friend in a class, you know this is the Memento class. Because remember, with Memento design pattern, you've got three types of classes. You've got the originator, you've got the Memento, you've got the caretaker. So of these three classes, I said you have to identify which one is your originator, which one is your Memento, which one is your caretaker, if it's there. But in most cases, your questions are centered on the originator and on the Memento classes, right? So if they have given you the Memento class and they are saying you worry about the book list class, and you know whenever you're applying the Memento design pattern to the originator, there are only two things that you do. You introduce the two functions that are required, the one to create the Memento and the other one to restore from the Memento. So then that makes your life easy. So if we go back to the book list class, which looks like this, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole class to make it easy for me to change it. So you've got your book list class here. So I've got class book list. And in here, to make it very straightforward, you've got public and under public, you've got your constructor, you've got your void edge book, which takes a book. And then you've got your queue list of type book, and it's called get list, which is a constant. Now under private, you've got your queue list of type book, and it's called book list. That's your class as it stands. And you know that with Memento, you need to introduce two functions. And the two functions you need to introduce is one to return the backup, the one to create the backup. You can call the function anything you want because they didn't give you a specific name you must use. But at the end of the day, it returns a Memento. They have given you the Memento class and it's called backup, which means this one should return a backup. And I can call this function create backup. The second function you need to introduce in your Memento class is the one that restores from your backup. So I can then go void restore, and obviously this receives a backup instance and it restores. So these two functions that you see here are an application of your Memento design pattern. And remember, we said these are the only two functions you need to introduce in your Memento, in your originator class. And that's it. Now, the question said implement, right? Which means you also have to provide an implementation of these two functions. So if we implement these two functions, we've got the create backup function and we've got the get backup, the restore function. So your create backup function is going to return a backup. So let's just do this nicely. Your class is book list, your function create backup, and this is going to return a backup. So you make an instance of a backup, B for instance. Now, if we look at the backup function, let's look at the functions in our Memento. It has a set backup function and a get backup function. So we can use these two functions. Sometimes you can use the constructor if it's written like that, but here we are going to use the set backup function and the get backup function. So we can go back here and say now we need to set the state. So you can go b.set, sorry, what's going on here? Set backup, and we give it our book list. And then we return our backup, right? Because under private, we are storing our book list inside a variable called book list. So that is what we use to set the state of our backup, which means your set backup function takes a queue list of type book. And that's how you implement it. Now let's implement the the restore function, which is obviously void, book list, restore. It wants a backup B, and in your restore function, all you do is you assign your book list from b.get backup, and that's it. That's how you implement your Memento design pattern, and that's it. It's done. There's nothing else to do. So you must be very clear of what happens where in the Memento design pattern. In the originator, you introduce two functions, and then you create the Memento class, and then you've got a caretaker. And the code involved is actually very simple. It's the logic you need to get right. Okay, so let's say you were also doing singleton design pattern. Now, I like this because these two do not interfere. This is not about singleton. So if you don't know the singleton design pattern, please go and look at the videos on singleton design pattern. But let's just do this one. You know that with singleton, you do three things. You hide your constructor. So this goes under, So this goes under private. I'm just doing this just to make you see how it would look like altogether. So this goes under private. You introduce your static pointer. So you go static book list. You can call this guy instance, whatever you want to call it. And then you introduce a static function to return your instance. So you go static, maybe, okay, so it's book list. And you can call this one get instance, for example. And these three functions illustrate what you need to do for the singleton design pattern. So these three things did not interfere with each other at all. So you were doing these three things for the singleton, and the stuff I have highlighted in blue, you were doing that for the Memento design pattern. There you go. So these three here were for singleton, and the blue stuff was for Memento. And in your implementation file, you were doing the same thing. You know, with singleton, you have to implement, you have to declare a static variable. So you would go book list, it's a pointer, book list, then it's called what, instance. Then you can initialize that to null, and then you implement your get instance function. So you go book list, get instance. And then in here, you've got your usual if statement. If instance is equal to null, then instance equals new book list, and then you go return instance. That's it. So that is everything all together. This here is for singleton, and this here is for Memento. But you are doing this all together in one class at the same time, and you have fully applied the singleton and the Memento design pattern. This, though, was mostly focusing on how to apply the Memento design pattern. Okay, let's look at our next and final example here on the Memento design pattern. And obviously, if you have more questions and examples, you can always join our live classes and we can break that down together. This question here says, consider the class definition below that will be used to implement a restore facility. Again, when they say restore, backup, rollback, everything, definitely it's the Memento design pattern. Or in this case, they did mention that it's the Memento design pattern. But once you know what the question is really about, obviously your mind starts thinking in the right direction. You start thinking of the right things to do. Anyway, they give you this class called backup image list. Assuming that this class is to be used in a Memento design pattern for a class named image list that maintains a queue list of images, a fragment of which is seen below, answer the questions that follow. Before you go too far, you have to identify which one of these is meant to be my originator and which one of these is meant to be my memento, right? Obviously, they might look the same because they need they have the same state, which is a queue list of images. But if you read your question carefully, image list is the one that is maintaining a list of images. And for you to implement the Memento design pattern, a class has been introduced called backup image list. It even has the word backup in it. So you've got every clue that you need for you to identify this is the Memento. I mean, you cannot have an originator called backup because the originator is the one that you need to back up, right? And let's say you're still confused about which one is the memento, which one is the originator. Let's go to question 4.1. The backup image list does not correctly implement the memento pattern. Rewrite this class definition so that it does. And they're saying, no, look, this is not really the way you do memento. So obviously this would tell you that, well, that then is my memento class. And you know that your memento class should have everything under private and then be a friend of the originator. So this here is your originator, and this here is your memento class. And they are saying rewrite this class definition so that it adheres to the memento encapsulation requirements, right? Which means everything becomes private and you introduce image list as a friend of your class. Now that makes life easy because all you have to do is you have to go class here, class backup image list. And in this class, everything is private, right? So put everything under private, right? Everything you see here goes under private. The constructor, this, I'm not gonna rewrite this. I'm just gonna, and then once everything is private, then you make your friend class image list. Then you make your originator a friend, and then you include everything else that is already in that class. That is how you correctly implement your backup image list class. 4.2 says that in the image list class, a function, say create memento, would be defined. You know that if you are applying the memento design pattern, you need two functions. They want to create the memento and they want to restore from the memento. So even if you were still confused, 4.2 is confirming to you that image list is the originator. Okay. This function would use backup image list class to create the required memento object, write the implementation of this function. Look, they don't even need to explain that it's going to use the image list class because, to be honest, this is obvious. If you understand the Memento design pattern, it's obvious. How else are you going to create this function anyway? How else would you implement this function? Because the job or the responsibility of this function is to return your memento, in this case, which is the backup image list instance. And in your backup image list class, you've got the get state and the set state function. So you want to use these two functions. And again, if you have understood Memento, this is very easy to implement because your class returns an instance of the backup image list. What is your name of your class? Image list, create Memento. Create Memento. And in here, you want to make an instance of your Memento. So I can go backup image list, B. Then I can call the b.set function. So I can go b.set. I give it my image list, which is this guy here, to this function, right? Set state, easy. So I go here and I go b.set state, I give it the list, and then I return b. That's a create memento function. You can go ahead and also implement the restore function The code here does not change. It's exactly the same code. You're using get and set functions. So it's actually very easy to understand. Finally, it says the Memento and serializer pattern have some similarities. How does the Memento design pattern differ from the serializer design pattern? Now, with the serializer design pattern, you've got two classes that are responsible for backing up a class. So let's say if this is our image list, right? Our image list. We've got two classes, the one to write to a file and one to read to a file. So we've got a reader and you've got a writer that is sitting here, right? Now, in the Memento design pattern, this is your originator. In your serializer, again, this is not an originator. There's no originator in serializer, but this is the one that you want to back up. Your classes have access to the state of the class. So you can actually write to an external device. In the Memento design pattern, your caretaker does not have access to the state of the class, which makes it impossible for you to externalize the state of the class. You cannot persist the state of your mementos to external storage, for instance, because the only class that can access the state of your memento is the originator. Whereas in the serializer, all classes involved have access to the state of your class, and therefore it can be persisted to an external storage and also be deserialized from an external storage. So that's basically where these two differ. Otherwise, that is the Memento design pattern. Let's keep on practicing. Go and look at other questions. If you have any more questions, you can always join us on our platform, ivtutor.com, and we can break things down together. Otherwise, that's it from me on this video. I'll see you in the next one.